So the Chinese have fired a shot across the bow to U.S. companies like OpenAI with the release of Deepseek. So this LLM been making some waves for the fact that doesn't require the high amount of iron that other LLMs do, and so there's ties to NVIDIA here, and maybe the recent drop in price in NVIDIA. We've got Strange Loop joining us here today to talk about the the moment of deep philosophical contemplation for U.S. companies, for Sam Altman probably particularly, who said that we need trillions of dollars of investment before we can get to the next level. And DeepSeek purportedly has done something with $6 million. So, Strange Loop, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me again on the show. Good to see you, Lucas, Grant, rest of the folks, Rusty. Yeah, this seems like a Sputnik moment for at least where, as far as LLM AI progress is concerned. Um, and seems this model seems to do a lot of things that has been promised by ChatGPT, OpenAI, and all Claudia, all the Anthropic and all the other firms at a fraction of the cost. And we can deep dive into it as to whether those claims hold. But at this point in time, it's the I believe the number one app on the App Store in less than a week's time. So it's gathered a lot of attention. Um, and we can go deep dive into more the technical aspects of what's what they're claiming and in actuality how it is. I ran it. It seems to work great so far. Seems to answer a lot of reasoning based questions as well. And if it's really done in that 6 million budget, I think it's not looking good for all our investments here.
Yeah, this is the thing that struck me first off, is I remember when Sam Altman was talking last year about the level of investment that he wanted to do with respect to taking AI to the next level. And it was this eye popping number that nobody really expected him to say. It was trillions of dollars. I think at one point it was mentioned that they might need $7 trillion worth of investment. You've seen these AI companies setting up shop right next to nuclear power plants because they think that they're going to soak up most of the power. And here's this little Chinese uh, model sneaks up from behind them running on a Raspberry Pi using almost no power. That to me is the biggest thing here is how efficient they've made it, the response they've been able to get, and releasing it as open source. All of these things sort of fly in the face of everything that's been going on in U.S. AI research. Even OpenAI has been transitioning itself out of having any of the open part of their name in it. I think the whole idea that it's open has sort of been sidelined as Sam Altman has gotten his profits and his percentages and whatever, and they've started to move towards their partnership with Microsoft. Like all this stuff has been upended by what was released by DeepSeek. But I'm a little curious about the pedigree of this particular model. So it actually builds on top of what Meta released as open source, their llama model, right?
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. And then it has added a lot of reasoning capabilities on top of that, um, which also puts it at par with some of the reasoning solvers that OpenAI just came out with.
Well, and if we look at their chart, of course, DeepSeek is the best at every single thing. So anytime you want to show your product, you always show the little check mark in the little
Right.
comma, the comparison set. So not saying that they're wrong on this, but if you compare it with some of the top stuff that's been released by U.S. companies, they're claiming that it beats it and on a minimum spec. So it doesn't require you to have a entire farm of 4090s all at your beck and call. Supposedly you can run this on much less. What did you run it on? Did you just run it on your regular old laptop?
I have a MacBook. I have a Linux-based machine. So yeah, I was able to run run some queries on it. It seems to respond quite well of certain queries that I would run on GPT. I haven't stress tested it yet to see where these things break. I'm sure it does, but so far I'm quite impressed actually. I don't say that quite often, but yeah, for if the cost claims are true, I think this is a major sort of uh, fu to the efforts here back in America and the amount of money we have put in these sorts of paradigms.
So usually when you run one of these LLMs locally and you run it on underpowered hardware, what happens is, the thing loads up, you start asking it a question, and then you see the gears grinding of the computer while it waits to generate the next token
Mm-hmm.
because it can't quite keep up. So in your experience, DeepSeek wasn't like this. You asked it a question and it speedily and promptly gave you a result. I was curious, did you get a chance to replicate the query that's been going around where you ask it who is the grand and glorious leader of the planet, and it says that it's the leader of China?
I No, I did not. I didn't try that one. Maybe I
Well,
will.
but it does speak to biases in training because I'm not sure with this release. I don't think we got all of, well, how did they actually arrive at the capacities of DeepSeek, right? I don't think we have everything that allows you to introspect for the biases that might have been cooked into this because clearly, no Chinese company is going to allow for the results of their AI to say bad things about the CCP, right?
Yeah, see yeah, it does come back to the question on which is still a black box is how this was trained, um, and what biases this thing has built in. Now, somebody can say, "Oh, so it's like part of their offerings are open sourced, and maybe people can evolve that in the future and whatnot." The initial training claims, yes, there's these. There has to be some inherent biases on the way the data was trained and how it was trained, whether there were some, because in the US we have to keep in mind all these sort of things around some sort of we are much more aware of these biases, whereas the East might not be or might not care for it. uh, Having said that, I would say this clearly shows that uh, if US says, "Hey, we don't want to give you the chips that you need," um, it's a China's way of saying, "Hey, look, we can still deliver, and you know, what are you going to do about it?" Right?
Right. It's interesting to talk about the biases in DeepSeek, but I think you're touching on something here, Strange Loop, that is more important. Um, that China has developed an AI that performs better uh, on on less or uh, whatever lower grade hardware, um, uh, because is to me part of what is incredibly upsetting here, upsetting for American countries, upsetting for America's economy and relationships with the world. And to give some background on that, the United States, in fears of China getting ahead, uh, limited the chips that were sent out by manufacturers around the world to China. Um, and so NVIDIA could not send their highest quality chips to China. And so part of this is a response to that limitation that the United States has tried to put on China. And limiting the supply of resources that enter China is something that the United States is hard pressed to find ways to do, because we don't make a lot here. So we had to twist the arms of other countries. We do try to limit the amount of dollars that China and other countries can use. We talk about tariffs, we talk about sanctions, but we've already seen China and Brazil and Russia and many other countries join hands to create their own payment rail system to get away from that limitation with dollars. So I find this a massive blow to the American tools of empire, and that China has released this, or the company that created it, ostensibly also off of $5 million, and admittedly off of technology developed by Meta with the llama LLM. It's the United States is going to. We are going to. I don't know what our response is going to be here, but I also think that we should have a conversation about the data that they use, because when you talk about how it's trained, I think I've wondered what the end goal for the LLM mafia here is in the United States. And when we look at things like TikTok and X and Meta, YouTube, these things are in some ways data aggregation to add to these. I've assumed we've talked here about how Google makes its money through selling ads on the internet, and I've wondered, whenever they move into this LLM model of people asking a question specifically to an LLM, where does the monetization stream go? So I think these are now all on the table as Deepseek sort of makes its splash.
So yeah, just to add to that, so DeepSeek, I think it took them around, maybe, I'm not sure, like around a month or so to train on 671 billion parameters. Now, that's not a small, I wouldn't say it's highly compressed. Like, that's a huge number of parameters. You're still going to have a lot of, memory, all those sorts of requirements. Um, but like, I would still say that this is a giant leap in terms of a nation state that's been restricted by the hardware, and they're completely almost taken out from the race of all the other folks here in the US who are trying to build these bigger systems. And what they've come back with is, hey, look, the things you're trying to do with all that money, we don't need that, right? So I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like, people are using these right now for the last week or so, and I can tell you the hype is real. They are working quite good from what I'm seeing on folks talking about it. And Twitter, I have to still complete my own tests, and I'm not saying this is, and me, I'm totally anti AGI rhetoric, which has been quite prominent in the US, which shifts focus away from uh, what kind of real tech has been used here, what is pragmatic, what is realistic. So all those sort of things might change with with this coming on the scene. And this is totally Black Swan event. I must say, nobody, at least in the US VC circles or investment circles, was aware of this.
It's interesting to think about whether some of the actions of the U.S. has actually prompted or forced this to occur. When you constrain the amount of hardware available, then you start to force innovation in a different place if you want to continue to have a seat at the table. It certainly seems to be the case here, where the types of policies that were pursued by the U.S. have directly resulted in Chinese companies becoming more innovative and trying to think about how can they do more with less.
Well,
Exactly.
and when you guys describe the that DeepSeek can be run on that they do not require uh, a large number of sophisticated computer chips of NVIDIA GPUs or whatever it may be, are we going to see people like not have to use uh, cloud-based systems or network-based systems? Are they going to be able to download and to fork their own language model onto their own machine that is independent from say from a Chappy GPT or from some network-based LLM that we've been using before?
You still need some decent amount of hardware. I wouldn't say we are there yet where you just have a CPU and some really, really crappy GPU and, things you expect the things to work as they are. Since this was pre-trained, the requirements still, I still have more than I have multiple GPU kind of system. So the minimal state which it can operate, I'm pretty sure it's still requires at least some decent amount of GPU power. Like I have 4070s and uh, with the lower kind of GPUs. I would love to see people being able to run this thing on that. The question, for me, the bigger question is that, of course, this still can sit in the cloud, but now the we are talking at completely different price points, and the companies are not running like on a razor thin margin as they already are in US, where they're spending so much on building these compute capacities and all these systems with their initial costs. For I wouldn't say companies like maybe people who are trying to build businesses out of wrappers of these things. It still would be a huge win cost wise, right? And traditionally in technology, we have seen anything that costs less, does the same thing, always wins. Uh, that's kind of the end state. Uh, so as far as that debate goes, I think looks like this is a clear winner. Uh,
Lucas, to
and
answer your question, here's the GPU recommendations according to Pro X for the DeepSeek models. It looks like the sweet spot still seems to be that NVIDIA 4090s. If you get your hands on one of those, still seems like the best card to play around with these LLMs. It's the one that I've
Mhm.
got my own rig as well.
Well, and you guys mentioned that DeepSeek is open source, but you also talk about the training that goes into it is still a secret. So the
Yeah, this is the GitHub repo right here. So for people who aren't as familiar with the normal mechanisms of distribution of open source software, so this is kind of the gold standard where people release software is GitHub. So I've actually got their repository up here. This is the one that you can go to get this thing so you can play around with it. It does require some amount of expertise. This isn't the kind of thing that you can just install willy-nilly, but if you're somewhat technically savvy, you can get this thing running on your own machine.
but and when they speak to the open source though, are the parameters of the AI known? And also is the information that was fed in to build the to build the knowledge base, is that known and is it changeable?
Here is the training, like how they did the training. The 600 billion is 671 billion parameters are you know there. So the how the techniques they use to train these models is um, still not out in the public how they did that, or maybe it is by now, but I haven't seen anything regarding that. So to question to coming back to what Grant was saying earlier, there could be a lot of inherent biases in these models. In certain queries that you ask the questions, they're going to answer in a certain typical like bias that has already been the weights that have already been allotted as a result. So I mean that can create a problem, and it will definitely create a problem. But that's a problem at a lower cost or almost next to nothing cost than having somewhat of a similar problem in a different context in on a on a on a service you're paying $200 a month, right? Uh, so uh, so yeah, it's an interesting sort of point and interesting sort of things unfold. I think after maybe this week will be interesting to see how this all of this unfolds.
And as we talk about the impact of what happens in the wake of the introduction to DeepSeek, in the title we've mentioned the LLM Mafia. So the producer NVIDIA, well, the largest producer of the GPU cards, um, I imagine they will see impact, but we still need LLM cards. Perhaps this just means who knows what this means for them. I but what do you guys see in one the first order of impacts? Maybe we see some deflation in Nvidia, but one they're still going to be required. But then when it
Yeah.
comes to the LLM companies, what is going to happen to OpenAI, and how are they responded? Have you seen anything from them?
Not yet, not substantially. I mean, Nadella came on I don't know, CNBC or somewhere to talk about it. It's super impressive, done by a very small team. I think that the company was like a hedge fund before, converting into going in this direction, which is kind of interesting. Um, yeah, and so I can see. This can come quite quickly that the company is all these LLM mafias, as we like to call it, um, uh, would be forced to either lower prices, offer more in that price structure, because now consumer has an argument to make. He's like, why would I use your stuff when this just stuff works just fine for what I need? And so that's creating a market pressure, which is an interesting one. I haven't I mean, last example I could think of is like analogy to manufacturing, right? Like manufacturing in China kind of drove away all the manufacturing that was in the US. Maybe that's not a direct one-to-one comparison, because there's a lot of other aspects to manufacturing. um, Whereas in software you can replicate with a small team, practically anywhere in the world. Like you can do that with software. But yeah, the first order impact is definitely some impact on price. Not much talk about AGI, how we're going to get there and give us a trillion more dollars, which eventually taxpayers end up picking the tab. Uh, so, um, so it's interesting, like because this is so close to, and it's interesting when DeepSeek announced its offering, it was on Trump's inauguration. So I don't know if it's that symbolic or, this is something else that's going on. But this is definitely a message that, hey, guys, yeah, you're going to constrain us. Like, look what constraint has done for us. And so this totally changes the game on talking about constraints in engineering and overall. Like, can a lone wolf build an AGI in his basement one day, given the enough constraints? Maybe not. And also, is this is a great opportunity to open up the talks again, and I'm trying to get my podcast again on this line of talks again. What new other paradigms that US can latch onto now, given the fact there are always these black swan events in the making, that now the biggest hegemony apart from US in the East, like which is China, can come up with. It's definitely Cold War era kind of vibes here. It's always worked out good for technology overall. Like, people think that we went to the moon because JFK inspired us. Yeah, yes, he did, but there was a bigger motive. There was a bigger geopolitical force at play, right? We wanted to show our nation's might and flex our capabilities, and so this is a way to flex. And this is probably gonna um, drain away all the charlatans online, or who've been whispering into government's ears, like, yeah, we should build these systems, and maybe government will have a hard look at these things and say, how can we do this more efficiently?
Can't believe I had to go slumming in LinkedIn to get this guy's response. Jan LeCun, who's the chief scientist at Meta, he's saying what this really shows is that open and open source is the winner here, and that's the way to go. He's talking about what we mentioned a few minutes ago, that this is a building on top of what Meta had already done with Llama, and sort of this is an evolution of that, and saying this is the clear path if we're going to continue to make progress. Is people have to keep showing their work, keep showing how it's done, instead of becoming more proprietary. And if I see any misstep that I think the US based companies have had, it is moving in this direction. And I think Elon Musk criticized OpenAI for the same reason, although I don't know if he's done better with Grok.
Yeah, see, in the US, we love to talk, right? And I'm not saying we don't deliver, but it seems like the space of delivery, even if the research started here, the I don't know if you call it intellectual property theft or whatnot, they've improved upon these things and offered to the world in a low cost way. They're trying to exactly do what they've done with manufacturing. With the intelligence, or outsourcing intelligence has been the new commodity, right? So they're really speed up the process of commoditizing it, where still I would say Facebook and all the folks, are still trying to productize it and not. I mean, the commoditization still was like maybe a year or two away. I mean, this just speeds up that process, right?
Well, the one, I think this calls into question the different models of the United States, private sector capitalism versus Chinese state-sponsored capitalism. Um, it's interesting to me that the team that created this Deepseek was a research team that was funded by a hedge fund. Um, and there are lots of claims like, oh, China steals information, steals technology from the United States. But one, what do you do about it once that happens? Two, if we believe in open and free markets, shouldn't we expect knowledge to proliferate throughout the world? So I'm kind of
Yeah, yeah, no. That's a good point, because I always come back to a statement by John Mearsheimer, he's great political pundit. Like, his statement is that this hegemony wars is like a zero sum game, right? Who's the biggest kid on the block? And in these hegemony wars, like, US wants to have a competitive advantage, or even a perception of that, right? And AI plays a pivotal role into that. This kind of breaks that narrative. And so that it's more of that. And I would even say that, I have often quoted, even in my podcast and my Twitter rants, that, and this is from actually not my original idea, it's Gary Marcus's original sort of talking point from last 10 years, is US should have more government funding in basic AI research. Manhattan projects that is 10 years in the making. And I would say this should have been done yesterday, because we could have surprised nation states with a lot of advancements that they couldn't even catch up with. But I hope that it's not too late. I mean, this is probably a wake up call. We need to look at new paradigms as well. This gives us the opportunity to do that because now it's here. They have productized it. They have launched it to the world. The world knows about it, and what we are going to do about it. If VCs are going to say, "Oh yeah, yeah, this is this, and they stole it from us, and now this is this. It's not really cost effective." Well, it works. The proof is in the pudding. Like people are using it. Within a less than a week. It's surpassed Chat GPT, right? Uh, so
What do you think of what Musk is saying here? Is that there have been claims that these guys have a whole host of H100s that they're keeping secret, and that they're making these claims to try and make the U.S. look bad. Musk is definitely being very forthright here in not believing what DeepSeek is claiming. Do you have any sense of whether he might be right about this, or is it just
he
we gotta
might
wait and
be.
see?
Yeah, I mean, he could be right about this. Then again, I would say the fact of the matter is, if what their pricing structure looks like in what I've seen, that remains and doesn't change, and they deliver. Somebody is absorbing the price now, whether it's CCP or like it's state sponsored, it's subsidized. Maybe we should adopt the same model. I mean, we will
Well,
be
look, we
forced.
looked
Yeah.
at the spec. The spec said use a 4090. I'm not sure what to make of that, but I guess
No,
we'll
no.
have to.
So they have the cloud offering, right? Like, or the let me see the pricing. There is a
Right. All I'm saying is
yeah.
if the spec says the best way to make use of DeepSeek is to run it against a 4090, I mean that hasn't substantively moved down the power
Yes.
requirements or the
Yes.
computational requirements. So definitely a lot of praise for them taking this model to the next level, because according to all their specifications and performance benchmarks, they're outperforming what the U.S. companies have done in this leap. But this is the race that everybody's been running, is to try and make these things better, faster, cheaper, and not require these huge clusters of GPUs.
Well, in
100%.
America, we have this an interesting narrative that the market is going to give us choice. I don't know how much it gives us, or that that's a good thing. And I looked. What was it? Peter Thiel was on Joe Rogan and a while ago, and Joe Rogan asked him about AI and about crypto, and he said, crypto is tech decentralization, AI is all about centralization. So whenever I think about the requirements and the developments that have gone on with China and their political arrangement, I think they may have a leg up politically with what they can accomplish there. And when I turn around and I look at how the internet and tech companies have been making money for the last 10 or 15 years, and that is through collusion in the ad market and
And now
and
with the hardware, no, I wouldn't say so. Maybe NVIDIA still has few more years to go, as Grant rightly pointed out. We still are not there yet with hardware optimizations or new hardware architectures. I think I read somewhere, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, but DeepSeek built a custom hardware as well, and they trained on it and all of that. So there's some specifics, but it's not a hardware breakthrough in no stretch of the imagination. So that's where the next innovation should come from. That's the real kind of ticker, as in cost and all of that. And I don't see that coming from big companies, because they have to recoup all their investment costs right now, right? If all these R&D costs, like, they have a time frame of like, hey, 4 years, 5 years, okay, then we can probably start to launch this thing that's going to cannibalize something. But they will be forced to launch something of that order if they get these market pressures where consumers are demanding this, like, hey, why should I pay more for this service when It's exactly what, like, I think the freemium model did on the internet, right? Like, people initially started to have paid services, then somebody came out with like completely free service, and they're like, oh hell, I'm not paying for that. Like, I'm calling it the Linux sort of moment for like LLM, where you know Linux was launched and Windows had to just then really compete in a different way. Yeah.
I think, I mean, I agree that the innovation that we're going to see in the future maybe necessarily has to come from the hardware model. But when we look at that freemium model was supported by changing who the customer was, and who, who was at sale. Like, all of a sudden, the users and the users' data was at sale. But then when we look at the vast amounts of data that these LLMs consume, it would seem to me that the data of any one person is much less valuable. And meanwhile, we see a collapse of the cabal, maybe, but with the antitrust cases against Google, we see a collapse of the marketing collusion that they, or the marketing monopoly that they had established behind the scenes on the internet. So I have to wonder what's going to happen. How is the internet going to pay for itself in the future?
Well, there's already been some amount of monetization of AI, people paying premium subscriptions and what have you. So I think there's some of that. There has been also some notes of these models feeding on the inputs that people have been putting into it, and whether that's part of the business model, what's going on here. I did find it interesting, and one of our listeners pointed us in this direction. So thank you for pointing this out, Brian Ramel, who is constantly talking about very interesting things, often on the subject of AI, and he said that this part of what DeepSeek has done here with the reasoning engine is partly the big huge leap forward here. Uh, Strange Loop, can you tell us a little bit, or do you have a sense of what the reasoning engine innovation was?
Yeah, just at a high level. I mean, so basically, it's more on building, having these rule based uh, sort of reasoning mechanisms where at the heart of it is still statistical in nature. Like, all these LLMs are still statistical in nature. I wouldn't call them a true reasoning engines, but you could abstract away like some of aspects where you can build sort of a model within a model, like a rule based reasoners or solvers, which actually has been an active research way from 1970s. I was in an X room yesterday, and there was a lady who's a here in SF, who's a researcher in the field from back in the day, and in heuristics and all the reasoning solvers. So solvers have been around for a while. They just found a way to pack it efficiently and do the same things. I think the aim there was to be at least at par with all the other models with ChatGPT's reasoning engine. So at least they've been able to demonstrate that they can do that and do all these compressions and stuff, and still, because the reasoning does not require a lot of, it's not compute heavy. Basically, if you think about it, if you have some sort of symbolic based rule based systems, representations, that uh, extract data and compute on it and gives you results, as compared to when you're pattern matching and doing reinforcement learning and all of the neural nets. You don't need giant neural nets to be able to do reasoning. That's the beauty. Like, that's so the analogy to that is the human brain. You don't need we are not operating on massive clusters, and we don't, our power requirements are very minimal, and we still can reason quite efficiently, right? So there are some underlying principles there that need to be explored even more after this. And yeah, solvers have been around for a while, and so they just found a way to like put that in this, and it's also a way to, of course, to market, and it makes it look more robust, and that it's answering what it's supposed to answer. So
Well, it looks like they've got their reasoner built in such a way that it's somewhat modular and able to increase accuracy with this chain of thought piece that they've
mhm.
got, and their ability to independently vary this thing. I find this to be pretty interesting as far as the architecture of how this thing's set up. This is way on the geeky side of going into the deep tech, but as far as seeing some of the people who are well versed in these worlds saying specifically that this is the part to really dive deep into and look at closely, as they think it's the primary part that's been pushed forward in this leap in the evolution, is that this part of it is the most interesting, and so probably a place for further study and inquiry as we all digest what DeepSeek's pulled off.
I'm
What
glad we've arrived here at the reasoner as we close out the show. When I talk about some of the disruption that AI has brought to the marketplace of the internet, the first time that I saw ChatGPT, I said, "Oh gosh, it's like a search engine," but now it is giving me one response instead of a selection of responses. And so when I think about the monetization that goes on behind the scenes and putting you know putting content that people might be paying the search engine or the whatever company to put in front of people, like now gets reduced down to one. And when we come to say this notion of reasoning as to what the specific answer that the user is looking for, um, it just reminds me that that part of the problem here that the LLMs bring us is that they only show one answer. Um, and the other thing that I think about, what was the response to the collapsing advertising model that had grown up on the internet? And when I looked at that, I thought, oh well, they are using equity, they're using monetized debt, and there's a whole lot of buzz, and there's Sam Altman saying, I need trillions of dollars to do this, I need billions of dollars to do this and to throw into a company, and there will be rewards in the future. So to have this kind of announcement from DeepSeek to interrupt that narrative that's going on is also something that
yeah,
could yeah, go ahead, Strange Loop.
yeah, it's super interesting, right? Like if Sam would have not said that publicly, hey, I need trillions to achieve this XYZ, I think it wouldn't have looked as bad. It wouldn't have been considered as just another development. Oh, yeah, now the Chinese can do that. Okay, at a low cost. Okay. Uh, but I think this will have like huge repercussions for the industry at large, that the house of cards that they have built of all these narratives in like, hey, we of course this is of course a lot hype driven as well, but the thing, it puts a crack in that narrative, and I don't know how. I'm just wondering how
Well,
would
think
they
of
yeah,
Lucas, I think we're gonna need to wrap here
yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
Let me give one thought here. I
okay.
like how what you say is anytime something seems to be non-political, look for the political underpinning of it. The Supreme Court is not unbiased, it's not apolitical, and I don't think that this particular thing is apolitical either. There is definitely something going on here when Elon Musk says that you had to have had access to GPUs to be able to do part of what was done here, calling into question the actual budget, and then looking at the specs for how to run this thing efficiently, and just exactly saying that the spec is, NVIDIA's 4090. I don't know. To me, it seems like this is definitely overselling NVIDIA from the perspective of I don't like seeing this drop in the price. This doesn't seem natural. It seems like this is definitely some kind of a coordinated attack, and that there's U.S. China relationships is underpinning this more than they might otherwise be willing to admit to.
Okay, well, one thing I'll close with then. Did Highflyer Quant, the Chinese company that made DeepSeek, did they turn around and say, give us that $1 trillion? No. And to me, that's what gets really interesting. Instead, they're offering,
the $1 trillion was for investment in clusters and power and hardware to run this stuff.
well, but did they like, keep this product under wraps and keep it a secret and say, give us that $1 trillion, or like investment come here? It seems like they're taking a different path forward. I don't know that
It seems like what they're doing is they're trying to make the U.S. companies look bad and make all the rest of these, folks that said these particular things look bad, while they might have been hiding what they were actually doing. I mean, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but it sure just doesn't seem like not everything's adding up to the way that they're describing it, and it does make it seem like they're trying to say, yeah, we're the Chinese, we can do it better than America, and maybe it's not.
Yeah. I totally agree with actually both of you. That might be the case, 100%, right? That behind the scenes, and in fact, if you look at my initial tweets before all this blew up, also when it first was blowing up, almost I said, "Hey, this is subsidized by China for sure in some sort of a way." I mean, they're not open and transparent about their investments. So definitely there is an angle to that. I am more now interested in how US responds to that. Are they just going to bitch and whine, say, "Oh yeah, this is probably fake. Well, we'll still keep charging the prices we are charging." Yet the consumers now are jumping, already are jumping off the ship and going, "Hey, I want something cheap." So what do you do in that situation? You lower your
We're
prices?
back into another
Yeah,
TikTok moment
yeah.
here.
Okay,
This
yeah.
is exactly where this is going to go. It's like we're going to have more U.S. Sanctions and
Ah,
trying to pick
yeah,
favorites here, which I
can
don't
be,
think
yeah,
is the right way to go, honestly. But I think that that's the likely response.
Well,
probably. Yeah.
strangely, great to have you on today, Grant. Great discussion. We'll keep an eye on DeepSeek and see what happens there. Good to have you back, strangely.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And if you're listening to this and you haven't had a chance to check out the YouTube channel, we do have all of our past shows archived there. So if you're liking what you heard on FOMO today, check out the YouTube channel and be sure to like and subscribe there. And we'll see you next time on FOMO.